Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy to See Me, the podcast that puts the spotlight on the overlooked and underestimated. I'm Erika Casupanan, and this week I am speaking to Willow Faith about coming into her queerness in front of the camera. But first, I love to start each episode talking about something I was happy to see this week. And this week, I want to talk about a book I finished reading called Worthy by Jamie Kern Lima. If you aren't familiar with Jamie Kern Lima, she is the co-founder of It Cosmetics. And this book was gifted to me by Penguin Random House Canada. So thank you so much. This book is about building your self-worth and what it means to have self-worth. And there are a few passages in the book that really stuck out with me, so I want to share two of them with you today. The first one is, you don't rise to what you believe is possible, you fall to what you believe you are worthy of. And this resonated because I think we can all think of times where we didn't truly commit and truly throw ourselves into the experience of going for what we want because we never felt worthy of it. And I hope that we can identify this and stop self-sabotaging and get the things that we want. Another passage that really stuck out to me was this. Sometimes in life, we send in our representative, the person who you think other people want you to be in order to be successful. And this creates a barrier of disconnection between you and the people around you and yourself. This resonates because how many times have you showed up as the person you thought you needed to be versus showing up as yourself? On top of that, how many times have you showed up as the person you thought you needed to be that you became so good at it that you forgot who you truly were? We are always on a journey of finding out who we are. We are always on a journey of finding connection. It's so clear that self-worth is an important tool on that journey. Totally recommend checking out Worthy by Jamie Kern Lima, and that is what I was happy to see this week. And hey, talking about bringing in your representative and maybe not even realizing who you are, it really goes perfectly with this week's episode because I am speaking with Willow Faith. Willow is a content creator and she was a house guest on Big Brother Canada Season 3. Reality TV is intense as it is. If you listen to this podcast, you know that reality TV is tough. Coming into your queerness is also a huge challenge. And Willow had the very unique experience of coming into her queerness on TV. She fell in love with a woman on TV on a show where there are live feeds and fans can watch you 24/7. And people were coming to conclusions about her sexuality and who she was in real time as she was figuring it out. In this episode, we are talking about that intense experience, what it was like coming out of the Big Brother house and hearing the fan reaction to her being queer. And we talk about how she managed the pressure of representing the queer community, what she did right, what she wishes she could do different. And we talk about where she's at now. I'm so grateful that Willow was willing to be open and vulnerable about her experience on Big Brother Canada and coming out. If you know someone who is coming out as an adult, feel free to share this episode with them so they can hear about Willow's experience and to know that they are not alone in their coming out journey. So I think you will enjoy this episode. Without further ado, here is my interview with Willow Faith. I hope you enjoy it. I feel like I should have hit record on this earlier, but
I know. We were just firing it off. We just actually had an interview for, what was that, 20 minutes?
Don't worry, listeners. We're going to recreate all of it, but I will introduce you. We are speaking to Willow Faith from Big Brother Canada today.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
It's kind of a trip having you on the pod because I was a Big Brother Canada fan, watched every episode. So I fully watched you on TV. And then now that we're social media friends, it's so weird to me.
Same with me. Like, I watched you. Actually, I didn't at first, and somebody was like, this Canadian is killing it on Survivor. So then I jumped in and was like, the moment that Jeff sent you away on that island, I was like, this girl is so badass. It's so real for me because I'm like, oh my God, Erika's interviewing me. The world is so wild.
Speaking of things that are wild, I think the other thing that was such a trip is at the end of last year when I came out and it got way more attention than I anticipated, you reached out and you were super supportive and you were like, we can talk about this anytime. We could podcast anytime. And at that time, I was like, I don't think I can do this. And you were so understanding. You're like, hit me up when you're ready. So I am so happy that months later, you are here and you are still open to chatting with me.
Always. We haven't even talked about this. When I sent that, I guess my counter transfers my bias. I was like, she's not ready, but I just want to put that out there at first because I'm thinking of what I wish I had 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so I just was like, hey, I'm just going to shoot this out and like also no expectations. If you actually had said to me, yeah, I'm ready to go next week, I actually probably would have been like, you sure? Like, let's wait a bit because it's a process and I never want to speed anyone's coming out journey. And so I think also the more, it's the same with life, the more we have experience, the more knowledge we have, the more then we can have a better understanding and perspective and can help listeners and people kind of see what we were coming from. It's the same as like a breakup. You know, you take your time and then after years, you can be like, oh, okay, this is what I actually learned from it. So I'm just really proud of you and thank you. I'm always open to chat about it. We can chat about it 10 years from now.
Oh my gosh, thank you. 9 years ago, when you were on Big Brother Canada 3, did you think that you were going to have this conversation years later?
No. Oh my God, no. No. I mean, when I went into Big Brother Canada season 3, I was looking for my husband.
Weren't we all?
I mean, wasn't that the agenda? Wasn't that the goal? Yeah.
I know that reality TV is a really intense experience and you need the time to heal from it. And then I also am in the midst of publicly coming out and I see how that experience can have a lot of overwhelm. You had the unique experience of both happening. So I would love to get into all of that with you because I could only imagine what you were thinking during that time.
Yeah. And it's so wild because Big Brother is such a unique show where you can watch us 24/7, right? So it's one thing to go through, but it's one thing for people to like record you for 10 hours a day, every day, right? I always ask people who've been on other shows, I'm like, imagine Survivor had live feeds, which I would actually love as a fan. But I'm sure as a player, you're like, thank God some things weren't shown.
Yeah. It's like you get upset about, well, I don't want to say get upset, but I think everyone has high hopes in terms of what makes the show.
Yes,
what ends up making the show is always 1% of what actually happens. But if the alternative is having everything available forever, because even though it's a live feed, that stuff just ends up on the internet forever. I would not choose that option. So you are a brave soul for doing that.
I'm glad you talked about that because we have that debate all the time about like good, bad. Obviously, Big Brother got rid of the feeds and like I think it's great for the viewer, but I think as someone who's played, but also I think of the actual cast members protecting people's mental health and jobs and things like that. I just think it's maybe for the best. But of course, I want to see everyone's gameplay and I want to see how it all plays out and I want everyone to have the edit they deserve. But that's just, I guess, the price you pay when you go on TV.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So let's talk about your Big Brother Canada experience. So first, before you went into the house, you said you were looking for your husband. Did you identify as queer at all? Did this thought cross your mind at all?
No, not at all. Like looking back, hindsight is such a wonderful, beautiful thing. Production called me, I would say 4 times before going into the show being like, hey, we just want to like clarify how you identify. One producer was like, oh, like bisexual. And I wanted to be on this show so badly that I was like, I'll make it with a girl. What do you need? I would have done anything. If they wanted me to play a lesbian, I would have. I just was like hetero. I didn't even know what to call myself. But now looking back, I'm like, clearly there were some underlining and like obviously production had saw things that I didn't, I was ignoring. So there were already those things of being like, wait, how does she identify? Because even looking back, how I would describe my person or how I described attraction, it was pretty gender neutral. And that's just my subconscious. That's just like in me. That's built in me. But yeah, no, going in there, I was like, I'm going to find my husband. I think in my intro video, it's like, I'm going to find my husband in the Big Brother house. And I believed it. I truly believed it.
Big Brother, I think, compared to all the other strategy games, it's very much showmance. They want the young people who are there, who are going to hook up, who are going to fall in love. I know that people have gotten married from Big Brother. So it makes sense that, again, in this heteronormative world, that was your expectation going into the house.
Yeah. And I'm a huge fan of the show. I've watched since season 1 of the US. Yeah, I saw lots of people get married. I've saw so many people fall in love and I was like, I want that. Especially someone who I really struggled with relationships. I was dating men up until then. And I really was like, am I able to feel love? Like I thought something was wrong with me. That's, I guess when we, did you think you were queer? I actually just thought something was wrong with me and I wasn't able to actually feel this type of love that people were talking about, singing about, creating movies about. I was just like, what is wrong with me? So that's, I guess, was kind of going through my mind is that I was like, maybe I don't get to experience the love that some people do.
I can't believe you just said that because I feel the exact same way. There'd be so many moments where I'd think, oh, is there something wrong with me? Because I just don't. I was like, oh my God, what if I'm not able to connect with people, or I just don't have that capacity for that type of romantic love? And then it just turned out I was just not with the right person that I was supposed to be with. But I definitely felt that. Thank you for verbalizing that. I'm sure there are people listening who feel that too. And then you just go through that journey to realize, oh my God, turns out there's nothing wrong with me after all.
Yeah, I tell people, I'm like, you were just playing for the wrong team, or like you were in the wrong arena, or like you were playing the wrong sport, or whatever that is. It's just the world is set up for this system that only helps a certain group, and it hurts the rest of us. And this is one of them. Of when you are born or grown up, you're just assumed to be straight. So like your brain isn't even wired to like, there's other options. There's other things you can feel attraction. And so you and I and other people, it's just like, wait, what's wrong with us because I'm not getting butterflies when my boyfriend walks in, or like when I kissed him, there's not a connection there. Like, what is wrong with me, or is this it? And it's kind of really sad when you think about it, but it is not nice that you also know what it feels like, but also to come on the other end and be like, wait, no, we can have that feeling.
And you had to navigate a lot of this in front of the public eye, as we were talking about, with the 24/7 cameras. I couldn't imagine what that experience was like. So you were in the house. You develop, would you describe it as a crush? Would you describe it as some type of a relationship with one of your other housemates?
Oh, such a great question. I would say it was like I was falling head over heels for her. It wasn't a crush because, well, to me, it was so intense, and to never have those emotions before, like literally, I constantly wanted to be around her. My stomach would do flips when she would lightly touch me. I wanted to be around her. I was thinking of her like 24/7. I was sweating a lot. I wouldn't call it a crush. I was full on acknowledging my feelings for the first time for another woman. And it was like so terrifying, but like addicting. Like I was like, I don't know what's happening to me, but I was just leaning into it.
When you're in a game like that, I found when I was playing Survivor, thinking about just the game is so consuming. So then how do you balance thinking about playing Big Brother and getting ahead while also these new and unexpected and overwhelming feelings for a woman?
Oh, it was so hard. And like looking back too, I can go back and look, you can see I start to just kind of forget about the game, and I am so engulfed in her. There's a point, I think, where I say like, I just want you to win. Like I've already won the game. And I truly meant that. And, you know, it was just like, if you've never felt loved before, if you've never felt those feelings, I'm telling you, like, I just was like, I don't need the money. I don't need the Big Brother crown. I'm like, I've won. And I still believe that, like, I get to live my life as me. I get to live my truth. And I know that's a huge privilege, but in there, probably the last 2 weeks before I go, I'm making some sloppy game decisions, and I'm putting everything into her. Like I am like, whatever she needs, whatever she wants. And like, I'm losing relationships with other house guests and everything because I am a lesbian in love.
What do you think the other house guests were saying as they're observing all of this happening?
One of the great things about my season was the fluidity. I'm so grateful for all my cast members because that was the first time I ever was around people who just were so open about sexuality and attraction. There were men in there that were like the jock hetero, but they were like kissing each other, and they were like, nothing mattered, and they were so free, fluid. And I was like, this is cool. I felt really safe. And so, you know, when we did get a lot closer, there were obviously comments being like, are you two a couple? Like, what is this? And I would look to her for the answer. This is good and this is bad. But I think it was really good to see how she navigated kind of those questions of who's the man in the relationship then, or like those normal questions that queer people get all the time. And I was like, what are you going to say? And she's such a confident, strong queer woman that she just handled it perfectly. And it was so good for me to see. Like, she's a role model to me, to see how she handled everything, but also stayed true to who she was. Like, I have chills talking about it. Like, I was like in awe. Like, I was falling more in love with her as she was doing this. But definitely the house guests were like, they're in love. But it was definitely confusing, I think, to a lot of them because I didn't know what I was. I wasn't as open as them. Like, I wasn't like, I'm queer or I don't know what I am. I was just like, I'm still here to find my husband.
And maybe win the game.
Yeah. Yeah. They never came to me and was like, we think you're gay. But I'm sure in their head, they were like, Willow is in love with her.
Wow.
I'm guessing. Yeah.
So knowing that there's the live feeds, were you also thinking about all of the people who are watching you?
Humans adapt. We're adaptable creatures. We survive. I would say after day 5, it becomes your normal. I don't know, probably the same of Survivor, where you're kind of like, okay, like this is how life is now. And so I kind of forget about the cameras most of the time. It'd be funny. We'd be in bed together and you could hear the camera though zoom in, and we called the camera nosy because it would always make this noise of like, and we're like, oh, nosy wants to come in on us. So like that was the only time I would remember, oh yeah, people are watching. But again, I had her being like, who cares? Or I had this disconnect from the world, which also made me feel really safe. So then made me feel like I could really lean into like my thoughts and feelings and start to be who I truly am. But I think a couple of times, I would wake up kind of crying because I just didn't want Canada to hate me. And I didn't know how I was coming across.
Why did you think they were going to hate you?
I think a lot of reasons. I think because I went in there and was like, I'm going to find my husband. But then I was like, what's happening? And then I felt like a liar. Mm-hmm. But then I didn't know who I was. And I felt like all these other house guests knew who they were. And I didn't want to offend the queer community. Mm-hmm. But I also didn't want to be insensitive. There were other relationships back home that I didn't want to affect or anything. And I didn't want to. I still had that religion trauma, and I was like, is this right? Is this wrong? There was like a lot of conflict battles in there, which was like, yeah, really hard. And I really cared what Canada and people thought. That was pretty hard, but it only came up a few times, but that was the battle. And that was actually one of the first things I said when I got out of the house was like, does Canada hate me?
It must have been so hard to go through that experience, especially as you're learning about yourself, where you don't really have anything external that you could look into or bounce off of. I know that I had Eva Bloom on the podcast a few weeks ago, and we were laughing about lesbian TikTok and how because of lesbian TikTok, there's probably so many more lesbians now. And I had that experience. I know many other people who have come out who've had the experience where you start feeling these feelings. You're like, let me look up if other people have felt this, or let me look up if this is normal to feel. So in a way, you can kind of double check what you're feeling against something else. But then it sounds like you're so isolated in this situation, and the only person that you could really check with and check against is the person that you're falling in love with. As helpful as she is, there's probably, some complicated feelings when it comes to that as well.
Yes. And spoiler alert, she won the whole game. And the reason why she did is because she kept her head on straight. She was playing the game a lot better than I was. So it's one thing to have someone, but to put all your eggs in one basket is not good. So it became almost like, whatever she says goes. Whatever she says about our relationship or our feelings was right. Like I wasn't thinking for myself, but also it's like when you do research or anything, you should have a large pool. Like of people. I have one person. Essentially, we had one other queer woman in there. And so everything, that's all I had. That's all I had to go off of. And she was the first kind of queer femme person I'd ever seen. It was really hard. I mean, I love TikTok and I love all those things and they're so helpful. And it is like the more we share, the more stories like you connect with mine, I connect with yours, but only having one can be pretty dangerous. It's the same thing with like only having one point of view, right? So that was, now looking back, I'm like, oh, it was really wrong for me to kind of put all my eggs in one basket.
And it must have been so complicated because watching the show, I remember a specific moment. It was after you were eliminated. So spoiler alert, Willow unfortunately doesn't win, even though we know that the other woman is the winner. From what I remember, Sarah miscalculated how a vote was going to go. And unfortunately, her vote is what sent you home. And I remember her just shrieking your name. And I'm like, oh, there's real care in the way that she screamed your name in that moment. So you know that the care for you is real, but then it's also, you know that you guys are in a game where it's in everybody's best interest to eliminate the other person. So it's really vulnerable to be in a situation where you only have that one person that you can rely on. So I can imagine what it was like.
Oh, it was brutal. And then obviously, like, I don't see her because she stays in the game and I don't, but everybody's coming to jury. And all I have is information from the jury. And they're just like, oh yeah, Sarah voted you out. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, everything I got played, like essentially is how and so I'm like, I threw my game away / like, I don't even know my sexuality / like, I think I loved this person, but clearly they didn't. It was so messy. I don't recommend it to anybody. If you're struggling with your sexuality or anything, don't go on reality television. Yeah. It was really, really hard. But I do believe there was care there. Like, I do believe, I get that question still today where it was just like, do you think it was real? And I was like, we cared about each other. She even says, I think it was like a detriment to her game. And it's like, definitely like there was real care there. That's not a manipulative tactic. Now, she definitely benefited from it, but it's very hard to be like, what actually happened in there and what was true? I still sometimes am like, did this happen? Did this not happen? Your reality is so altered. It's also been so many years that I'm just forgetting a lot. It's extremely hard.
Did you stay in touch with Sarah after the show?
A little bit. It was really hard for so many reasons. And I think this happens with lots of house guests or cast members because there's a lot of feelings there of not only the game, but then also I had true feelings for her and she had a life, she had a partner. I really was looking to her to be like, what are we or what am I? Which instead of doing my own work, and I didn't have autonomy, and that's really dangerous. And so for a little bit we did and then kind of just went our separate ways. But honestly, like I have so much love and respect for her and all my house guests. I would not be here today. I don't even know where I would be, honestly. Would I have been married to a man somewhere? Maybe. My whole Big Brother experience, now looking back, is like, I'm so grateful and so lucky. And I was, to win maybe would have been cool, but I feel like I've gotten so much more out of it. I get to live my life like how it's supposed to be. I get to be me, which is like I don't know, like it's wild to think that I almost went down a different path. So I'm so grateful for her, and we just need more people to be themselves and share their vulnerability and their stories and their struggle, and more people can hopefully get to live their truth as well. And she's inspired me to share my story. So I'm very grateful for her and everyone else that helped in my Big Brother journey.
It's incredible how much reality TV can change you. If you are open to it, if you are not going to cling on to the old or existing version of you, it can really change you.
Yeah, I think, experiencing adversity and I think challenging things and disconnecting from the world is so important. You have this bond. Yeah, we're trauma bonded, but it's like you have this bond with these people forever, and you'll never have an experience like that again. And I'm sure you have that with your cast members as well. And you learn so much about yourself. Like, I think I really started to learn to love myself after going through that experience, because it's like, I can get through anything.
Oh, yeah. I always think that there's two parts of the reality TV journey. There's the filming and actually playing the game, and then there's the actual show and all of the fan reception. Big Brother is unique because people are watching you and fans are reacting to you and they're coming to conclusions about you while you are still in the jury or while you're still in the house. So when you come out of the house, did people think you were queer? What were fans saying about you?
I wish I remember what it was. Now, back in my day, TikTok didn't exist. Social media was like, I think Instagram was just becoming a thing. Twitter was like the hot one, and YouTube. I think there was like a blog or something. I don't know if it's called like For the Love of Willow and Sarah or something. I can't remember. I'm sure people know. There was like a blog, so many posts, and someone had sent it to me on Twitter, and I tried to stay away because I was like, really, I mean, you know what it's like to kind of get pushed back into reality, and you're, what is life? Like, how do I talk to people without thinking they're going to vote me out? I started to read, and I read every single one of them, and it was so crazy to go, like, I'm talking, they had every day and every time stamped that Sarah and I were like intimate or talking.
Wow.
And like conversations that I forgot. And then there's the comments of like, what an idiot, or like, how does she not know she's gay? And I was still struggling, and it really did hurt for a bit because I felt like people knew who I was before I did. And I felt really scared. And then there were times people would tweet out or message me and they're like, why aren't you talking about this? Like you were saying, like, why aren't you making a stance? Or like, why aren't you doing an official coming out post? I just wanted to scream. Like, I don't know yet. Like, I really don't. Because I had boyfriends and I loved them. Like, I loved them in such a different way, but I was just trying to figure out everything. And people were like, you queer baited us. People were like, I came out because of you and now you're not even out. Like, I just felt so much pressure as a people pleaser. I really struggled with myself. And that's what I meant, I guess, when like, did Canada hate me? I'm like, does the queer community hate me? And are they accepting? Like, do they actually want me? Do I belong? Like, it was really, really hard. And then also the game as well. House guests being like, you said this, or like, you lied about this. But then I'm also trying to navigate, wait, where do I fit in? And like trying to figure out labels and stuff. It took me a really long time. I'd say like a year to really process everything.
Yeah. After coming off a show like that, people don't realize that there are still challenges within the cast and there are still people who are trying to figure out what happened. And then watching it, and then you hear the feedback from the audience. It is very easy to see things online where people are like, you weren't good enough. You did this wrong. You did this wrong. And then the added layer of feeling like you're a queer imposter. Like, oh my God, am I queer enough? Do I deserve to be part of the community? I just went on a reality show and was kissing this girl. How did you stay centered at that moment or stay grounded, or did you not?
I'll be very, very honest. I did not handle it well. And if I could go back and if I can get more advice after your reality show or anything, I think if you're trying to navigate coming out, go to therapy. And if you can, a queer therapist really helps. I finally did go to therapy. I think it took me like 2 or 3 years after the show and had a queer therapist and changed my life forever. But for the first year, I was in a pretty serious depression and I really, really struggled. I hated myself. I felt like all my house guests hated me. I felt like the fans hated me because I wasn't talking about being gay or because I didn't end up with Sarah. I didn't know what was the truth and I couldn't have my own thoughts and I couldn't have like my own feelings. But we were also told, it's changed a bit, but it was like, I felt like you couldn't be honest online about how low you were doing because it was like, you had this amazing experience. 10,000 people tried out. 16 of you got to do it. Or like, you got to play the game of Big Brother. I'm so grateful. But like, I mentally was not doing well for so many reasons. And now I think we're talking about it a little more, but I would just sit in my bedroom with like a blanket over my head watching lesbian YouTubers and being like, okay, like, could I see myself with them? Could I not? You know, it was a really hard time. And I would go back and I would watch these videos that they made of Sarah and I, like the kind of compilations.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, like we were in love. But then I would watch something else and be like, okay, no, we weren't. Like I didn't know what was the truth. It was so hard. That first year, I would say was one of the hardest years of my life, just trying to figure it out. And I wish I reached out to more people. I'm here now and I'm very, very grateful, but it was really hard.
I'm so sorry you went through that. I know that many people I've talked to who have been on Big Brother, because there's so many live feed recordings everywhere, people will go back and look at specific conversations where their game changed and then try to analyze what went wrong. So there's that one element. And then you're also like, am I lesbian enough? Was I actually in love? And for people listening, dating women is so much more confusing than dating men for many reasons. So it's like, now you have all this footage to pour over. It's so easy for that to be so all-consuming. As much as reality TV, amazing, dream come true, life-changing, so happy that I did it. I know you're so happy you did it. The reality is it also comes with the challenge of having your self-image challenged in a way that you can't really anticipate until you go through it. And I think it's okay that there's the high highs and there's stuff that is kind of shitty about it.
I think that always comes, right? You can't have any good days with bad days, but like if there's, intense highs, there's gonna be intense lows. That's just how like the world works. Yeah, if I can give also any advice, they don't have live feeds now, but like it's the same thing with life. Like the best that you can do is not have regrets or go back and be like, well, if I did this thing, because you're coming from hindsight, you're coming from what you know now. And like you just did the best you could there. And also try to be like, what did I get from this experience? It's a little different because you won. So like you probably don't have any like thing. Maybe you were like, oh, maybe I wish I didn't do that conversation because like we hurt people, right? And I never want to hurt people. The biggest thing I used to do, I would go back and be like, I wish I was a queer person. Like people are like, oh, would you play again? And I'm like, it's so hard to give your whole life up again. But I'm like, my biggest regret is like, I want to play as me now. I want to be the gay person, right? I want to be the confident. I want to be me. And I want to be like, I'm going to find my wife in there. That's what I want. that's probably my biggest regret. But I know it's helped a lot of people come out to watch me 24/7 fall in love with a woman, and grateful that I could help some people. But that's probably my only regret now looking back, is that I wish I had better language. I wish I, could represent the queer community better. And I wish I could have been myself.
Well, you were doing the best with who you were at that time. I think that's the other thing. It's weird how we get frozen in time as the people we are on our seasons. And you just have to accept that that's just who I was, doing my best back then.
I love that you just said that, like, frozen in time, because I find myself looking back to like that time of year of life, like when I was 26, and I'm like, yeah, I think when something also traumatic happens to us, we kind of shift back to that age. And I'm glad that you said, yeah, frozen in time. That's exactly it.
How do you feel about how the show, on the edited version of the show, not the live feeds, how do you feel about how the show portrayed the relationship you had with Sarah?
I don't even remember, but they didn't show too much. But that was also, Sarah and I didn't give them much, right? There was a time that they brought me in there into the diary room, and production or producers asking, what our relationship is. And I remember crying. Like, I remember really crying, because I then knew, I was like, oh, this is a thing in the outside world. That was like an indicator. I think I was in there for like over an hour maybe. And just talking about what she meant to me. And they were like, is it a friendship? And I was like, I don't know. And I really meant that. I was then voted out, I think, the next day. So they couldn't really play on that story. But yeah, we didn't give them much. So like, if you don't give them much in the diary room, they can't really make it an edit or anything. If you want to see Sarah and I, it's like definitely on YouTube in the live feeds. But in the show, I wasn't shown much or portrayed much. Maybe that's for the best, because somewhat that protected me, somewhat that protected us. But I always want queer representation now. But looking back, if that had been all over the show, I think it would have been way worse on my mental health, because there's a lot of people that don't watch the live feeds. So if you just watch that show, you'd be like, oh, they like made out in a pantry, and that Willow girl had like a mental breakdown when she found out Sarah voted her out. But like, people who watched the live feeds really knew what was happening. But I got some hate. I got a lot of hate about obviously my reaction to like my crying and to Sarah. Like, people, were calling me Weeping Willow, and they were saying I was dramatic. I was like obsessed with her. They were like, Sarah, get Willow a restraining order.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, and those things hurt, obviously, is like, a 26-year-old in love. But the show, I don't know. They did the best they could, I think. I'm happy they didn't exploit me, I guess. But I think they would have if I gave it to them, because it's good TV.
I think that back then, I don't know if they were prepared for that type of storyline, right? Like
No.
a young woman coming into her queerness. Was Sarah in an open relationship?
Yes.
So in a non-monogamous relationship. And already Sarah was the employee. So I think that would have been a lot for them.
Already, yeah.
When I watched the season, I couldn't really tell what was happening. And I think because I only watched the edited show, I didn't really watch the live feed. So I was like, oh, okay, they're like friends who kiss. But then what's interesting was Kevin and Pilar on your season too. And that was like showmance, very clear, man and a woman. Of course, they got married. Now they're not together. I did The Traitors with Kevin.
Yes.
It's also really interesting to see how back then, how a hetero presenting relationship is treated different than this non-monogamous, queer women questioning bi relationship was treated.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to ask the producers now, or like, what would have happened if Sarah and I went into the production in the diary room and was like, I'm in love with her. We kept calling ourselves a womance, which like, I love the first like kind of woman showmance. But Kevin and Pilar and me and Sarah were voted for like best kiss. And I remember thinking, I'm like, we're going to win. How are you not? And we didn't. And I remember being like, maybe Canada doesn't like us, and maybe Canada doesn't like gay people. Well, not gay people, because I didn't use that language yet, but like, they don't, because Kevin and Pilar were the norm, I'm using quotation marks, people, a normal couple, right? The heteronormative couple. So I was like, that really played a mess with my head as well. But also I love Kevin, because Kevin is super fluid and he's so confident in who he is. And I am so grateful for him, because he was like, I do what I want. People are attractive. And I was like, thank you for challenging my thoughts. Like, thank you.
I know people love to come for Kevin because of his sexuality. And Kevin is a big character. I mean, I played with him only for a little bit.
He is.
And I'm like, if we're going to make fun of Kevin, don't make fun of Kevin for his sexuality. That's the last thing we should make fun of him for.
Yes. No, Kevin is, I mean, he's built for the TV. He's built for on screen. He is a character. But if anything, let's all applaud of who he is. Kevin is who he is. I mean, I played with him when he was 22. He was young, 23. I don't know. He was a baby. And he was saying that, like, I was like, this guy's awesome. But yeah, we can make fun of Kevin for many things, make fun of me, but not someone's sexuality. That's another thing. People like to put people in boxes. People like to like give one certain label. I don't know how you felt, but when I was coming off of Big Brother and people were like, well, what are you? How do you identify? I was so scared that I would say the wrong label and I couldn't go and change it. Mm-hmm. Like, it was like, once I had it, it was there forever. And I kept being like, well, what if I go back to dating men? Like, what if I don't? And I just felt like I couldn't say anything because it was like going to stick with me forever.
Yeah, I remember speaking to a friend who is a more experienced lesbian, has known they've been a lesbian for decades.
A seasoned lesbian.
Gotta love the seasoned lesbians. Honestly,
yes.
they show up for us newbies.
They do.
And I remember telling her, I'm like, lesbian feels like the best word for me, but I'm afraid, what if I meet the mythical man who makes me change my mind and I start dating a man? Even though I don't think that's going to happen because I tried for a long time. This friend said to me, you can call yourself whatever you want and then you can date whoever you want. If something changes, that's fine. Everything is fluid. Just pick whatever feels good to you right now. And if you want to switch it an hour from now, like, that's fine too.
We love your seasoned lesbians. Like, that's the right answer. That is totally the right answer. And how did that feel for you hearing that?
I felt like a huge sigh of relief. I think the other thing is, when you go through this experience when you're older, it can be scary. It's like you're going through the deep, dark woods of all of these feelings that you didn't realize were legitimate or things that you repressed without realizing, and then uncovering all of them. One, it's a little scary because you're like, oh my God, this is who I really am. But then it's also such a relief because you no longer have to feel like something is wrong with you.
Do you ever feel, I felt like too, it felt like I could like breathe deeper. Like, I really didn't realize how I was like breathing so shallow. Mm-hmm. Like, I really felt, and I could experience my emotions deeper, if that makes sense, as deep as that is. But like, I felt like I could really like be more sad, be more happy, really like let things out. I did a paper on human sexuality recently, so this is all new in my mind, but I was saying how I see labels as clothes. So like, if you put something on and it fits right, then that's great. Wear that. But if something starts to feel tight or itchy or wrong, take it off, try another one. Labels should be like how you try on clothes or get new clothes or, you know, change your style. And that's totally okay. And I've just been using that. I use the word queer because it's more inclusive for me, but call me a lesbian. I'm happy with that. A gay woman, you know, call me Willow, whatever you need to. But I know who I am. And also the labels don't really affect me, but I just use queer because it's more inclusive. But when I first came out, I felt like lesbian was a dirty word because that's how the world had portrayed it or put in my mind as a heteronormative thing. So I was like really scared to use that L word. I remember being like, I think it took me like a year to finally like say it because I was like, I'm not an actual lesbian, because my schema and my concept of lesbian was like completely skewed.
Yeah, it takes a while to get there. I remember thinking, oh, maybe I like both men and women. And then eventually you go on the journey and you're like, I actually don't like men.
And that's okay. And some people do find out that they like both. And that's great too. Or you're like on that fluidity scale of like 80-20 or 60-40. Did you ever read The Lesbian Master Dog?
Yes, of course.
I mean, it's problematic for a lot of reasons, but I think everyone should read it because there are some good things in there. Maybe we need to update it a bit, the language and stuff. But the thing about being desired, attraction, actual sexual attraction, these are really important things because I learned that I like to be desired by men and like I can find them attractive, but those actual sexual desires and feelings only come towards the women's side. And I was like, my mind was blown. So if you're questioning, look at The Lesbian Master Doc, but also like take it with a grain of salt because there's some problematic things.
Take what resonates and then leave everything else. I even remember learning about compet and I'm like, oh my God, everything about this totally makes sense. And now I understand. And I even think watching your season of Big Brother, the two women kissing, not a big deal, no screen time, the man and the woman falling in love. Okay, big focus of the season. It's just in the world and it's built in that heterosexuality is at the forefront.
Yes. Representation matters. And like, you know, looking back on all of these things, it's like, where were you seeing people like us? Where were you seeing anything like that? Where did you learn about queerness or, you know, sex? for like not straight people. Think about where we get our information. Thank God for TikTok now, but like just be very aware of and be really kind to yourself, because I know people are really hard on yourself, but I'm like, the world is set up for straight people, which is really sad. When people late in life lesbians, they're like, oh, I wish I knew sooner. I'm like, listen, you did the best you could. There's not much out there sometimes, you know? You're doing the best you can. You're on your own journey. It's okay. The most messages I get is just people like really concerned about, did I miss out on life? You're living it right now, my love.
Exactly. It's present. It's ever changing. It's fluid. I always joke with my friends. I'm like, I think I'm still 7% straight. That's 1% for each member of BTS. You can call yourself whatever you want, and you can be as gay or as straight as you want.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And leave a little bit percent out there for like those unicorns.
How do you feel now when you see people who have been on reality TV or who have been in the public eye come out?
Well, I mean, it just happened with you, which was so wild. I remember my heart just like sank. All these feelings came flooding. It was my countertransference that I was like, I wanted to hug you. I wanted to sit with you, because I remember just feeling so alone and isolated, and also being like, what do I do? And also wanting myself, I wanted to speed up the journey. I just was like, I need to know. Like, I was literally like, I would watch 9 hours of YouTube a day and be like, I still don't know. Like, I just, instead of just being patient and kind, but I definitely have a mama bear feeling when I watch people on social media, on reality television or anybody online and putting their life online. Like, Big Brother's hard. I would say Love is Blind is, I think all of them are hard.
Yes,
so
they're
like
all hard.
And then I came off the show with less social media, but now in today's world, it's all we use. So it is like, I have such a soft spot for people. I look at it completely different. I look at the show completely different. I still watch it. I like the social experiment. A lot of the time I'm just like, it's an edit. And I try to, give every player, every person a grain of salt. It's the same thing. Kevin Martin's a character, but I love him as Kevin Martin. People are playing things on TV, right? We're doing things on TV, and it's an edit. You have to remember, reality television technically isn't real. It's a show, right? And so I have a lot of feelings for that. I'm actually in my master's right now for clinical counseling to be a therapist. And one of the avenues I would love to do is helping people when they get off reality television. Think a unique aspect that I bring, obviously with queer people and trauma and other things. I know that I needed a really good therapist when I came off the show, and how to integrate back to life, but also how to have my autonomy back and not letting the world take control of my own thoughts and feelings. If you're coming off the show, I feel you. I hold space for you. And also my DMs are always open. So please reach out.
There are so many things that people don't consider when it comes to coming off reality TV and coming out. And the other thing that I never anticipated, and I think that this is similar to what you experienced too, is I find that generally people are accepting and supportive, almost to the point where the support can be overwhelming, where then people want to hear more about your story and celebrate you and get your take on things. And often you can feel pressure to do that when you don't feel ready. Did you experience that when you came off of the show? And then how do you navigate that now?
Definitely. Like I was saying, I just am such a people pleaser, and I had a blog about me. I had all these messages about me that were mostly queer people, or like, I had people be like, I want to come out to my parents. What do I say? And in my head, I'm like, I don't even know I didn't come out to my parents or friends or family. Like, I have yet to say it to myself, really. I felt like I was letting them down, and I had this pressure to like, okay, Willow, get it together. Like, figure out what you are and then help others. Cause, it's like put others' needs ahead of mine. And I really struggled. I think at times I was giving advice, or I was giving so much to the online community before even protecting my peace or taking care of myself. Like I said, that first year was mentally really hard. And I think one of them was like, I was giving too much for people. I believe I went to Pride in Newfoundland that summer. It was the first Pride I'd ever attended. People were coming up to me and was like, are you this? What are you? I had a couple of people being like, I want to kiss you. Like, there was so much happening, and I was like frozen. Like, I did not know how to react. I didn't know how to act. I actually think I ended up leaving early because I was just so scared of saying the wrong things or doing the wrong thing. But I was so confused. I was so confused. And I really regret not protecting my peace. I should have honestly stayed off social media a bit, but it's also fun to like interact with people who watch the show and like it. And it's nice to get attention. And now I am so much better. But that's like 5 years of intense therapy. That's learning how to set boundaries. That's having my autonomy back. That's being comfortable in who I am. I still work on that almost every day, but definitely being aware of what I put online and what, I give people. My advice has changed a lot differently. I think I was almost giving too much of my own personal information to people of like things. And now a lot of my advice is honestly like just give yourself grace, patience, and like a lot of self-love. Like I wish I was just kinder to myself. And yeah, I don't feel this pressure that I'm letting people down. I guess I don't have that voice in the back of my head being like, you're letting people down. Like that's finally went away. And that's over a lot of years and working through that. But I'm happy to where I am today. And I'm like, it's not even a second thought to me. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gay. Oh yeah, I'm queer. Before I would question what to say. And now I kind of take it for granted, which I said I would never do. But like, I've come so far, but I want to remember where I came from. And your story had like triggered all those things back, which is just remember like, oh yeah, like not everybody has gotten to where I am yet. Also, we need to help them as much as we can, but also be kind. Because sometimes, I'm sure you've seen, the queer community can be a little intense, a little demand. Love you all. Just protect yourself, protect your peace. And like, you will be able to talk about it when you're ready. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be the best. It's going to be, when you're ready. And that's okay.
What I have learned is nobody supports quite like the sapphics. And also, anytime I've said no, every single person has been like, oh my God, no, I totally understand. I remember what it was like. And I'm like, okay, this is such a supportive and also understanding group. So if anybody is feeling confused or pressured or like they should know more about themselves or they should be further along, whatever that means, totally normal. You are on the right track.
Yes.
Thank you so much for chatting with me today. I feel like we could go on forever. If people want to keep up with you, where can they do that?
Willow_Faith at Instagram, Willow Faith 0 on TikTok. And that's usually just really what I do. Willow Faith on YouTube. Sometimes I make some videos about my life on there. Actually, my coming out story fully from Big Brother is on there. If you want to watch that, that's where you can find me.
Thank you so much for chatting today. And who knows, maybe in like 9 years, we can do this again.
We should definitely do this. Or maybe there'll be like somebody else. How fun would that be? Like somebody else? Yeah.
Yeah. So if somebody comes out, then it's like, we'll be there. We got you.
Yeah, we're like passing down the torch.
Thank you, Willow, for being so open about your story, about being on reality TV and coming into your queerness publicly. I swear, Willow and I can talk forever. So if you ever want Willow back on the show, let me know because I know there's so much more that we can talk about in terms of coming into your queerness as an adult. Now, I love to end each episode by answering a listener question. And this week, someone actually sent me a question through my DMs about queer imposter syndrome and how to best navigate queer imposter syndrome. And I wanted to talk about this because I am no expert and I can confirm that I feel queer imposter syndrome too. So I am not an expert, but I will do my best to respond to this question. Number one, recognize that it is totally normal to feel this way. I am telling you, I still feel this way all of the time. So don't feel like you are isolated. Don't feel like you are the only one. Know that it is perfectly normal for you to feel this way after going through a big life change like this. I also want to refer to an episode I did, episode 50, with queer sex educator Eva Bloom, because she gives so much good advice for people who are queer late bloomers. So one piece of advice is seek out resources that can help you. Follow creators online who can talk about the late bloomer experience. For example, Eva, listen to podcasts and seek out resources that can help you to better understand and to help you feel less alone when it comes to your queer imposter syndrome. Another thing that's really important is to know that nobody else and nothing external affirms your queerness. Knowing that you are queer is enough. So this means you don't need a relationship to affirm your queerness. You don't need a partner to affirm your queerness. You don't need to check off certain experiences from a list in order to affirm your queerness. Just knowing that you are queer is enough. And last, again, some advice that I got from episode 50 of the podcast. Engage in the queer community in other ways. dating and sex is not the only way for you to engage with your queerness. You can engage in terms of consuming queer media, reading queer books, watching queer movies, and even attending queer events, because there's so much community and there's so much to the identity that you can find different ways to engage. And hopefully this can help you to feel more firm and grounded and confident in your queerness. But again, I want to remind you that you are not alone. Actually, when I posted a reel about Lesbian Visibility Day, I had some DMs and I had other people who are already in my life reach out to me asking for my advice, which, number one, thank you for thinking that I am capable of giving advice, but also thank you for being vulnerable and for wanting to connect. So I'm looking at planning a queer imposter syndrome episode and bringing someone on so we can have that vulnerable conversation, or as vulnerable as I'm willing to be on the internet and in public. So let me know if you have questions about queer imposter syndrome, and I will make sure that we do our best to cover them in an upcoming episode. But for now, I want to say thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Make sure you share this episode with anyone who wants to hear more about someone's coming out as an adult experience. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And I will be happy to see you next Monday.